Good morning. This is the sermon for July 5th, 2020. Um, in this moment, I've really been struggling um, with coronavirus and being stuck at home so much and not being able to do the things that I like to do. One of the things that especially my lay people know is I am a planner. I like to have the plan. I like to know the plan. I want to be able to have my ducks in a row, and I like church to be church. You know, church is a specific thing in a specific way, and so with so much of us doing online services, or some of us are doing drive-in services, things like that. I've really been struggling, trying to figure out how to do and to be in the midst of all of this chaos. So today, our story is a continuation of the story of Abraham. When we last left off with Abraham, he was coming back down from the mountain after being told to go up and sacrifice Isaac, and then God provides the sacrifice. And a little bit of chaos is happening. Where we're picking up the story today is going to be in Genesis 24, but I'm going to tell the story. So Sarah has died, and Abraham is, he was already old when we first met him, and now the story is talking about how he's even getting older. And he realizes that for God's covenant to continue, it needs to be passed on to the next generation. And so the obvious next step in this is that Isaac needs a wife. And so Abraham hatches a scheme, as he seems to always hatch a scheme, and he goes and finds his oldest servant. And he says to his oldest servant, so Isaac needs a wife, and what I want you to do is I want you to go back to my hometown and find him a wife. Now, can you imagine being in the servant's shoes? Your boss has just called you. He makes him make a promise, a covenant with him, and his only instructions are, go find a wife in my hometown for Isaac. And that's it. Doesn't tell him where in the town, doesn't tell him what family, where to go, what type of wife. Abraham doesn't give him the attributes that he's looking for in a wife for his son. He just says, hey, you, go over there. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. The servant is carrying the weight of the continuation of the covenant that God has made with Abraham, the ability of Isaac to have a wife. So like any normal person, he's like, so first of all, Abraham, the servant asks, if I'm to find Isaac a wife, shouldn't I bring Isaac with me? It seems like it would be a smart thing in this plan that Isaac would have a say in what wife we're bringing to him. And Abraham says, nah, he doesn't need to come, because he doesn't want Isaac to get tempted to stay, because part of the covenant is don't go back to your homeland. You're to leave your homeland and to go to the promised land that God has chosen you. So Abraham's like, nah, you're fine. And so, the servant has made this covenant to go find a wife, and he says, well, so Abraham, you don't seem to have a lot of details in this plan. So let's say I go to this town and I find the right woman, and she says no. What's going to happen now? And Abraham, being the good boss that he is, he's like, oh, well, if she says no, you won't be punished. Just come back home. It'll all be okay. So the servant is like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. So he gathers a bunch of camels and loads a lot of the possessions and riches of Abraham and sets out to Abraham's hometown. Now the servant has a little bit of a plan. So something you will learn if you pay attention in the Bible is that if you are a man who's in search of a wife, where you go is the well. It's kind of like the Bible's version of Tinder. You're looking for a spouse, go to the well. That's where the ladies are, and maybe you'll find your wife. Later on in the Bible, Jacob finds Rachel at the well. Moses has this romantic story of rescuing Zipporah and her sisters at the well. And so the servant goes to the well, but he recognizes that this mission isn't just Abraham's mission. It isn't just his mission, but it's God's mission. So before he even starts to look around and talk to women, he sits down and he prays and he says, God, I really need your help. So here's what. If someone comes to the well, a woman comes to the well, and she offers me a drink and then offers to give water to these 10 camels here, that's the one. And before he is even done praying, Rebecca shows up at the well. And the servant walks up to her and says, hey, can I have a drink? And she's like, oh yeah, here, drink from my jug of water. And before the servant can even ask the question, Rebecca's like, oh, do you need your camels watered? I'll give them some water. Now, in what the Bible is doing here in this time period, especially in Eastern cultures, hospitality is a huge deal and a sign of the hospitable person is seen as a virtuous person. So, anybody would have offered him water and let him have a drink of water. But the fact that Rebecca is offering to water his camels is a statement on the type of personality she has. So now, in case we don't understand what exactly she's offering to do, I was researching how much camels drink. So evidently, in one session of drinking water, one camel can drink 20 to 30 gallons of water, and this guy has 10. So if you do the math, that means she lugged around 200 to 300 gallons of water back and forth from the well to the watering trough. Now, I have a hard enough time lugging 2 gallons of milk between my car and the house. Can you imagine lugging 200 gallons of water? And this is just a statement on the type of person that Rebecca is. And so immediately the servant's like, God answered my prayers. She is the one. So he gives her a nose ring. Now, yes, in the Bible, we give engagement rings. They give nose rings. So he gives her a nose ring and some bracelets and asks if there's any room in her father's house for him to stay. Once again, emphasizing this idea of hospitality. If you were a really hospitable, virtuous person and a stranger comes to your town, offering them a place to stay at your house was seen as as how you treated people. And so Rebecca says, yeah, sure, we have room in our house. Let's go. And she runs ahead and lets the house know, hey, we're going to have a visitor. We need to make some food, get a room ready, that kind of stuff. So Laban comes out her brother comes out to greet this man. And we're going to pick up in verse 34. So the servant says, before I even eat food, I have something I need to let you know about Laban. And Laban says, okay, tell me about this. And the man says, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has richly blessed my master, has made him a great man, and has given him flocks, cattle, silver, gold, men, servants, women servants, camels, and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah gave birth to my son for my master in her old age, and he's given him everything he owns. My master made me give him my word. Don't choose a wife for my son from the Canaanite woman in whose lands I'm living. No, instead, go to my father's household and to my relatives and choose a wife for my son. I said to my master, what if the woman won't come back with me? And he said to me, the Lord whom I traveled with everywhere will send his messenger with you and will make your trip successful, and you will choose a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's household. If you go to my relatives, you will be free from your obligation to me. Even if they provide no one for you, you will be free from your obligation to me. And so the servant goes, today I arrived at the spring. I went to the well. And I said, Lord God of my master Abraham, if you wish to make the trip, I am successful. When I am standing by the spring and the young women come out to draw water, and to whom I say, please give me a little drink of water from your jar, and she responds to me, drink, and I will draw water for your camels too. May she be the woman the Lord has selected for my master's son. Before I even finished saying this to myself, Rebecca came out with her water jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew water. And I said to her, please give me something to drink. She immediately lowered her water jar and said, drink, and I will give your camels something to drink too. So I drank, and she also gave water to the camels. Then I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore him. I put a ring on her nose and bracelets on her arms. I bowed and worshipped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who led me in the right direction to choose the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. Now, if you are loyal and faithful to my master, tell me. If not, tell me so I will know where I stand either way. So Laban and Bethuel, so her brother and her dad, both responded, this is all the Lord's doing. We have nothing to say about it. Here is Rebecca right in front of you. Take her and go. She will be the wife of your master's son, just as the Lord said. When Abraham's servant heard what they said, he bowed low before the Lord. The servant brought out gold and silver, jewelry and clothing, and gave them to Rebecca. To her brothers and to her mother, he gave the finest gifts. He and the men with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they got up in the morning, the servant said, see me off to my master. Her brother and mother said, let the young woman stay with us not more than 10 days, and after that she may go. This was a normal thing to ask, like a waiting period. It was seen as, you make a betrothal and you give the siblings, you give the family time to say goodbye because, people traveled farther. They didn't have planes, they didn't have trains, that kind of transportation. And so you never knew the next time that you would see your family member. But he said to them, don't delay me. The Lord has made my trip successful. See me off so that I can go to my master. They said, summon the young woman and let's ask her opinion. They called Rebecca and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. So once again, they're emphasizing Rebecca's awesomeness, that not only did she do this amazing thing, but she's willing to forgo saying goodbye, spending some time saying goodbye to her family to go and be a part of the mission of God by marrying Isaac. So they sent off their sister Rebecca and her nurse, Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebecca, saying to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000. May your children possess their enemies' cities. And Rebecca and her young woman got up and mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebecca and left. Now, so here's where we get to the really romance part of this story. Now Isaac had come from the region of Beer-lahai-roi and had settled in the arid southern plain. One evening, Isaac went out to inspect the pasture. And while staring, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah stared at Isaac, and she got down from the camel. Now, this is a point in the story where English doesn't quite translate what happens. So what they're saying here in Hebrew is they're saying she saw Isaac in the distance and was so surprised by him that she fell off her camel. It's kind of like they're saying it was like love at first sight. She saw him, he was awesome, and she fell off her camel. And said to the servant, "Who's this man walking through the pasture to meet us?" The servant said, "He is my master." So she took her headscarf and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac everything that had happened. And Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent. He married Rebekah and he loved her. So Isaac found comfort after his mother's death. So the servant goes on this really ridiculous mission to find a wife for Isaac, recognizes that this isn't his mission, it's God's mission, asks for God's advice, finds Rebekah, this amazing, virtuous woman who later on is seen as the one who understands what God's plan is when everybody else doesn't, which we'll get to next week. And on top of that, Rebekah is being shown as, in the midst of their grieving about Sarah's death, Rebekah is seen as the source of comfort for Isaac, that not only did he marry her, but that their marriage was full of love, which in a time of arranged marriages, this would have been a big deal. Not only did he have a marriage, but he had one full of love. And imagine if that servant hadn't have taken that chance. So 10 years ago, not 10 years ago, for Steve and I's 10th anniversary, we decided to take a trip to Boston and to go and see the sights. Now, you remember at the beginning of this, I told you how I am a planner. I like to plan things in an orderly line, ducks in a row, that kind of thing. So months, you can ask Steve, he will tell you this. Months before this trip, I was doing research. I looked at all the restaurants in the area, I researched all the hotels, all the things to do, and I was making a list, making my itinerary. On day one, we would go here, we would eat here, we would be in this place, we would stay in that place, so that by the time we got to Boston and on our trip, I knew how this trip was going to turn out, how it was going to look. So day one, our plan was we were going to get on the T. We were going to eat breakfast at our hotel. We were going to get on the T, ride into Boston, walk to the aquarium, and then from the aquarium, we would, you had to walk by the harbor so we can look at the harbor and see where the tea party happened, and then go to Quincy Market and eat lunch and enjoy some of the sights. That was my plan. A, B, C, D, final results. So we get off the T and we're walking. And we noticed this coffee shop, and we decided to go into the coffee shop and get a cup of coffee. And they give me my coffee. I think I got a cappuccino. I'm not sure. It had this pretty design on the front, one of those fancy coffees with they make faces and hearts and flowers and the foam. And I drank the coffee. It was some of the best coffee I have had. It was amazing, amazing coffee. And we ate our little mini breakfast and drank our coffee, and then continued on our way to the aquarium and had a really great day. Now, if I had been so stuck in my itinerary, if I had been so stuck in, you get from the T to the aquarium, I would have completely missed out on this cup of coffee. When Steve and I talk about our trip to Boston, one of the first things we talk about is the first thing we did was get a cup of coffee. And it was one of the best cups of coffee ever. But we would have missed out on that opportunity if I hadn't, if I had had my blinders on and just been going from point A to point B. In this time of having to do church differently, A lot of us are struggling. We're struggling in one of two ways. Maybe you're in the middle. I shouldn't assume, but either we're on survival mode, and by survival mode I mean we are hunkering down in our little house bunkers. We've got our food and our necessities. Our families all hunkered in, and we're not really thinking about anything else except staying with our own people, and we're scared. Hunker down in fear. Or the other response is acting like nothing is different and trying to make things go back to the way they used to be. Um these There's a danger in this. You see, if Abraham's servant had allowed his fear to rule him, he would have missed out on this amazing opportunity to be a part of God's story in the Bible. If he had said, Abraham, you haven't given me enough details. I am afraid. I'm going to this weird city that I've never been to. I'm going to, you want me to just walk up to random women and say, hey, will you marry your Abraham's son? Doesn't necessarily seem like the greatest of plans. If he had allowed that fear to paralyze him, he would have missed out on this great opportunity. God's mission still would have happened. Isaac would have found a wife eventually. But this guy wouldn't have been a part of the story. We would never have him written in the text. On the other hand, if he had gone into this with complete confidence that he knew exactly the kind of wife that Isaac needed, and he was going to do this in his own strength and his own power, and he just barged onto the well and walked up to the first woman he saw and didn't pause, would we have had Rebecca, this amazing woman? He might have missed out on this opportunity. In the same way, if we allow our fear to paralyze us in this time, if we allow our fear of the unknown, our fear of this different time to keep us from seeing outside ourselves, we might miss out on what God's doing in the world, on the moments of finding the cool coffee shop with the cool coffee. We might never even leave our home. On the other hand, if we're so concerned with getting life back to the way it used to be, that we don't pause and recognize that something different is happening and that God might be using this time to try to speak to us, you might just blow past the coffee shop and keep on going to the aquarium. It doesn't mean that you don't accomplish the mission, but you might miss out on some beautiful things that God is trying to do. So the challenge we have today and right now, and the challenge I will give to you is, if your tendency right now is to hole up and to be afraid, try to see what God is challenging you to do, how God is pushing you to think outside of your family, to think outside of your comfort zone. That maybe God is challenging you to look around your world and to see how God is working in your neighbors and in the community around you. If your temptation is, I'm not comfortable with the way things are and I want things to return to normal, this isn't the way it should be, I'm not happy, that kind of thing, pause. Pray. Pray before you continue. And think about, what is God trying to teach you in this moment? What is God trying to do in this moment What things are, now that God's pushed you out of your comfort zone, pushed us out of the comfortable way of doing church, the comfortable way of hanging out with people, the comfortable way of shopping. What might God be trying to tell you in this moment? Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for everything that you're doing for us, for your patience, for your love, for how you continually invite us to be a part of your mission. Lord, for those of us who are afraid of getting sick, who are afraid of being brave, show us, help us to stop just looking at ourselves and help us to see how you might be working around us and challenging us to serve the people around us. For those of us who aren't comfortable and want things to go back to normal, Lord, help us to not be in such a rush to return to normal that we miss out on what you're doing around us. Help us to pause, to look, to pray. Lord, I especially ask that you'd be with those who are sick, that you'd bring comfort and healing, that you'd be with those who are struggling, who are asking questions, that you would have your hands on those who in this moment are grieving. Please bring your healing. And Lord, we just thank you for everything that you have done for us. In your name I pray. Amen. So, people of God, as you go out into your world to love and serve your neighbor, may you stop, may you pause, may you be challenged to see the way that God is moving in your community as you go out to serve. Go in peace.